He's here! He's here!
Wait, who's here?
Turn him up, turn him up, turn him up, turn him up.
What's going on?
He's gonna argue with you.
Mm.
Okay,
What's up,
so
man?
let me set the stage. Asmongold
Okay.
fucking hates Titanforging and
I do.
Warforging. He fucking hates it. He thinks it ruins the game. On the other side, we've got Chinglish, who fucking loves Titanforging. He lives for the shit. He lives for it.
Okay.
He fucking breathes Warforging. Go ahead, boys. Go ahead.
Okay, so the first thing I just
Okay.
want to say off the bat, right? I think that I agree with you heavily that the RNG factor of getting loot in general with BFA is like one of the biggest and worst points of BFA.
Okay.
Where it's RNG just to get your loot before Titanforging even becomes a factor, right? I agree heavily with you in that.
Okay.
So my thing with Titanforging, right, from a full clear rating perspective, for me, and it's been a long time since they've added it in, like I'm going to use Legion as an example because then there's more re-clears, right? We rated the guild that I was up to, the rating guild that I was with, we re-cleared every single week, and Taurus twice a week until the expansion ended. We didn't take any time off. We didn't do anything like that. We were literally in there every single week, clearing 2 times a week. So one of the main reasons why we would go back in there and do that, we weren't doing sales, we weren't doing anything like that, is for Titanforging, right? That was literally one of the only reasons why we would go in there, right? Now, keep in mind, I really think that Titanforging needs to have a cap, okay? I think that it should go like looking for raid caps at normal caps at heroic caps at mythic, and then there's like, say, 10 eye levels plus or whatever it is like that.
Okay. Well, I understand what you're saying. Like, for me personally, and like, because that's obviously like what your guild does. For me, I think a lot of people obviously did stop after we killed Mythic Argus, and then they didn't really have like the same motivation to keep farming it over and over and over, because it's like you can kind of do the math, and your character was going to plateau at around like 370 or something like that, maybe 375. And I think that once players realized like that they were able to plateau at that low point, as soon as they got to that point, they just stopped trying. And I think there's equally as many of those, and probably even more, that stop trying and stop playing because they run out of opportunities and chances of getting to better gear. So what ends up happening, I think, is that people reach a plateau with their character's gear, and then they stop playing out of apathy. And I would argue that I think players that stop playing out of apathy is a worse end point than players that stop playing out of completion. Because one ends with fulfillment and the other one ends with apathy and boredom.
See, I think that one of the biggest problems though that you have is like you're looking at it from a point of view of someone that can happily do transmogs and transmog competitions. You're looking at it a little bit from a streaming perspective as well, which is a hard thing for us not to do, right? Because it's what we do. Like, it's hard for you, I think, to see it as well, because like you could literally say the most outlandish thing right now in the chat, right? You could be like, Blizzard should delete this entire area, and 90% of your chat is going to say facts. Or
I don't know.
so
Like, sometimes
true,
I'll
right?
be like, man, I really...
Yeah, but you know that like they're going to be like,
just to
facts.
troll me.
True.
Okay.
You see what I'm trying to say there, right? So it's like you got to look at it from a completely and a lot of people give me shit because I try and look at my responses to this stuff from a completely non-streamer point of view.
Okay.
From a non-streamer point of view, we can't say that the majority of the player base are happy to kill the boss once and then that's it for the rest of the expansion. Majority of people want to go back in and they want to re-clear every week. And it's not necessarily about killing the bosses. It might be
how do you know
that raid encounter. I don't know, but neither of us do, though. That's the thing, right? Neither of us can assume that we know what the majority wants, right? So I'm only saying from my side of it, there's a lot of people that the raid that they get to do every week, even if they've already cleared the boss, that might be the funnest thing for them to do in WoW, to go in there with 19 other people and have fun. And once you've killed the boss once, right, you sort of can relax a little bit more and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. I think that's probably true, right? I mean, sure. I mean, there's a lot of people that do like going back and re-clearing for Titanforges. And the only argument really that I'm making against that is that I feel like there's an equal amount of people that don't even really want to try because of that. And at least that's the way that I feel. Or as soon as I finish killing the boss even once, I don't even worry about getting my baseline best in slot without Titanforging even considered, because I know that I'm never going to reach the point where my character is fully complete. And I think that's more of a psychological thing. Also, I don't think that it's completely true that the only reason that I dislike it is because of streaming. Is because if you can go back and like look at videos that I've made, even as like a very, very, like I've even made videos that predated my YouTube channel that I have now that talk about why I think it's a negative feature of the game. So I don't think it's necessarily an outcome
keep in mind,
of
that's
me
just
streaming.
one
Yeah.
part of it, right? I'm not trying to say that that's
Okay.
the only thing. Like we actually agree on a lot of this stuff, right?
Oh yeah,
We
I
agree that
understand.
like one of the things that I'm not super worried about, and I say this as like someone again who's
Yeah.
like fully cleared, Titanforging. Like when you see like a random dude who has like one Titanforge piece, right? I sort of agree with like it doesn't really matter to me. Like some guy getting some 395 trinket, it sucks to see, right? It's like whatever. But then my original point sort of comes back in where I think there should be a cap, right? If there was a cap, that would completely counter that. So if some guy does looking for raid and then he gets a, I don't know, whatever the equivalent would be in normal, that would counter 90% of the frustrations from people there, right? Where if
I
you
agree
saw
with
some
that.
guy that had a Titan Forge looking for raid trinket that only went to the normal eye level, you wouldn't be as flipping out as if you saw some guy with a looking for raid 395 with a socket trinket or armor or whatever the hell it was, right?
Yeah.
I think the for me personally, the bigger element outside of Titan forging is this RNG on top of another layer of RNG.
Well, you're right about that.
Where, and it really sucks. Like this is the first time. Like I've been streaming full time 6 years now, and I really try and make a middle ground decision when I see a lot of the changes. Right, I try not to make an emotional decision and see it from both sides of the sort of argument. Right, and sometimes people give me shit for that because I'm not like, you know, F Blizzard, fucking, they should change it back to what we want, right? Because I think that there's an element of you really need to try and have a non-emotional decision to see why they might do it, because they're not gonna cater the player base to like method players.
Here's one thing I would counter that with is that I do feel like a lot of MMOs and games like World of Warcraft thrive out of psychological stimuli. So to like take away and like negate and relegate an emotional response to being just a knee-jerk reaction and not a legitimate conversation to have, I don't think is entirely true, because I feel like there's a lot of people that felt good and felt fulfillment out of the game for being able to complete their gear and get the kind of things that they wanted. And I think that's something that we are missing now. And the way that it makes you feel, I don't feel like is necessarily a bad thing, and it's a conversation to have. I think really you can ask yourself, like, why were people addicted to WoW? Why were there, you know, CBS and like all these news stories about people being addicted to WoW back in the day? I think that's a psychological component, right? I mean, obviously you can like make an argument that it's like, oh, chemicals because of like dopamine, etc. But why is that happening? I think a big component of it is psychological. And that's one of the big problems with Titanforging, and I think it's also a big blind spot that Blizzard's had recently, and I think their answer kind of indicates that in the fact that they are saying, well, you do feel one way, but you should feel another way. And I think it indicates a disconnect between the developers, like what they think players are going to do, and the emergent player behavior that comes out of their decisions.
See, I think so. Asmon and I sort of had this discussion the other day, right? I think you need to look at it for me again. So I try and look at the bigger perspective of it as well, right? When you look at going into an internet cafe or a LAN cafe, whatever you want to call it, 13, 14 years ago, right? You would go in there and it would be like literally every single person is playing World of Warcraft. There's a few guys playing Counter-Strike 1.5, and there's a few guys playing Dota. The MMORPG genre now is so dead compared to what it used to be back then, right? Now, people all the time will be like, look at the numbers of BC, look at the numbers of Wrath of the Lich King, and you can't. It's such an invalid argument, because when you look at internet cafes back then, when you look at these things, right, that's what everyone would play. I literally went to an internet cafe in Korea just the other month, and there was no one, not a single person playing WoW. Same in Sydney, we had an event in an internet cafe. There was one dude playing World of Warcraft. If you look at the gaming market as a whole right now, it's literally no one cares about MMORPG games. If you gave me $100 million and said, invest this into a game, it sucks for me to say, but I wouldn't invest it into an MMORPG game because it's just nowhere near the genre that it used to be. So I think a lot of the feelings and a lot of the things that we used to get from MMOs are very, very different now. And I think Blizzard try to cater to that a little bit. And again, just to be very, very clear, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that aren't understand what I'm saying, I agree with you with a lot of the loot discussion, right? There's a lot of things that I don't like about it. But I think we have to look at it as Blizzard is sometimes trying to cater to try and stay valid, because realistically, MMOs are a dying breed, right?
Do you think that? Well, let me ask you another question. Like, I think I can also, like, partially. I feel like your internet cafe comment is like, I think that's partially true and partially untrue, and it's more of a structural concern because I think that a lot of people, the reason that they played WoW at internet cafes back then is probably because of the internet connection and like the fact that you needed like a consistent internet connection to do that kind of stuff. And back whenever you were able to like play something like CS:GO or something like that, it was much easier to have a LAN and do something like that than have a stable internet connection back then. The same with computers. So I think that maybe some of the people that played in internet cafes back then might have played WoW more often then because they didn't have access to the same type of technology at home. I don't know if that's true. Maybe
Well,
that's
no, exactly the same for me.
okay.
I didn't even have a computer, right? But if you look at the gaming market right now, you look at the free-to-play market, you've got games like Path of Exile, you've got games like League of Legends. Now, we can all sit here and be like, League of Legends are mega lol, but there's no denying that has taken millions of players away from the MMORPG genre, right? You look at stuff like Fortnite, again, we can all sit here and be like, Fortnite are mega lol, but there's literally millions of people. Millions and millions of people that play it, right?
It's a huge game. It's really popular. But one question that I would counter a lot of this with is, why do you think MMOs are a dying breed? Do you think that it's just a change in consumer expectations and behavior and wants? Or do you think it's something that is by the nature of the MMOs itself? Because if I play something like Black Desert, I feel like it has very consumer unfriendly features and systems. And I think some of those features and systems are being replicated in WoW. And so while MMOs might not necessarily be like as popular as BRs are right now, I think that a large part of the reason that they're not popular is so many MMOs thrive off of these pay for convenience and pay to win features.
Well, the thing is with pay to win though, right?
Okay.
Like pay to win works. There's no denying it, right? Like if you look at the gaming industry, last year made $108 billion total, right? The sport industry made $98 billion. So the gaming industry made more than what the sport industry did in general, right? So if you look at that, over 57% of that was made by mobile gaming, right? So pay to win stuff works. There's no denying that anymore, right? It just works.
Well,
so
it makes money. Like, and I think that is like, do you feel like, because this is a conversation I've had before, is that I think that there is like, obviously there's the profit motivation, but I also feel like there should be a certain level of like ethical, like design that's made that doesn't necessarily like just manipulate players and
again, the key thing that I'm trying to say though is like, again, me responding to this stuff is me. This isn't the way that I feel, right? My answers and discussing this with you when it comes to Titanforging and stuff is why Blizzard would do it from a non-emotional point of view. I would love to say, you know, fuck Titanforging, keep the game the way it was. You know, I don't want retail to be vanilla WoW. I don't, because if I had to play vanilla for the last 13 years, I'd hate it. Right, I want the game to change and I want the game to progress. There's a lot of things that I hate in BFA. I could sit here with you and have the complete polar opposite and be like, fuck this in BFA, but it doesn't do anything, right?
Of course. So
for me, I'm trying to give you a non-emotional response when it comes to some of these things, right? Where I can see why they're leaving Titanforging for that element of, people get excited about it and stuff like that, right?
I completely agree with you there. It's not that I can't see the intent behind Titanforging. I understand it entirely. And I think that's really what's frustrating to me, is that I feel like the intent is, I don't really know if the word, I think manipulative might be a little bit too hyperbolic, but I think that it's definitely it's a transparent system to extend gameplay. And I feel like it extends gameplay at the expense of the fulfillment of players that they used to have. I think that really Titanforging would be okay with me as long as there was an alternative to it. I have no problem with there being gear RNG and anything like that. But the concern that I have is that gear RNG is the only thing that there is, and it's what defines your character. I think that if you compare WoW with a game like Diablo 3, that, let's be honest, a lot of WoW systems now are built off of Diablo 3 systems. The big difference between WoW and a game like Diablo 3 is that WoW, a big component of WoW is playing with other people, and other people voluntarily choosing to play with you. And whenever there's a random system that creates arbitrary differences in power between different people, and then people have to make a decision on their own of who they're going to play with, it creates a system where players who get unlucky are actually structurally disadvantaged by the systems that Blizzard's basically created in WoW.
Okay, so on that point, that's why I think the main point that I'm trying to make is, I think, again, and the main thing is if Titanforging had a cap. I just want to say that first, right? Because that's the most important thing. I think we both have more of an argument about the actual RNG on top of the RNG.
Okay.
I think is the main thing that I have a problem with looting right now is I think week 5 into Mythic, I was using all Mythic 10 pieces because I just couldn't get, it didn't matter what I did, I just couldn't get the loot to drop that I needed.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what was happening, right? It was, I would kill the boss and I just didn't get it. So there's that RNG on top of the RNG of getting a Titanforge. And I think for me, what the point that I'm trying to make is I have a bigger issue with the fact that it's like RNG to even get the gear now, and then you can't trade it because of the new loot system and all that sort of stuff, more than what I do compared to the actual Titanforge system, if that makes sense, right?
So it's more that it's like you dislike both systems, but you dislike the baseline RNG more than the added RNG?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
because the point of, and I only sort of tuned in a little while ago, and you were more saying about the Titanforge system, right? And again, the cap thing, if that existed, I think the bigger issue is how loot changed out. Like I could sit here for hours and be like, they need to bring back tier systems. I think that was.
I mean, you've been playing, like, I respect your opinion very much because you've been playing WoW longer than I have. Like, you got High Warlord back in vanilla. And I don't really see a difference between, are you purely talking about the requirement of personal loot, or is it something more than that?
I think it's the personal loot thing, right? Like, I don't mind a loot system thing where you can reward people who have been there every single week type thing, right? Because right now there's nothing. Say if we do Zul, for example, right? You bring in 8 freaking rogues. Someone has like a 345 rogue and you bring them in there. They get a Mythic Warforged dagger and they can't trade it, right? And it's like trash because normally you'd be able to give that to a raider who's there every single week or something like that, right? Where now that system doesn't allow you to do that. And it feels shit as a player. As a Mythic raider, it feels shit. Whether a Titanforge or not isn't the issue. It's the matter of like, we can't trade that stuff. We can't reward players where, say, 5 pieces of loot drop from this Mythic boss. Okay, we want to give this to that person. We want to give this to that person. But no, our healer's got loot for the last 5 bosses somehow via bonus rolls or just via normal drops. And then it's fucked for everyone else, right?
I agree with you completely, and I think that the issue is that I feel like the philosophy that Titanforging is stemmed out of is also the same philosophy that personal loot has stemmed out of. And I think Blizzard has made a conscious effort to create a divide between what the player does and the reward that the player receives and muddy the water between those two things. So we've seen a lot of different changes, like having, not being able to need roll on anything you want. That's like a very small, like very minimal change. Then, or things that you can't equip in the same way, right? Like you can't need roll on a dagger if you're a warrior. And there are all these different ways that Blizzard has kind of tried to constrict the player experience to only being completely encompassed by the individual and no longer being a group-driven experience in the same way that a guild or a group would be. And I think Titanforging is an example of that because it allows people who are outside of the Mythic group experience to receive the same rewards that the Mythic raiders would have. And I think personal loot is just the next step of that.
I can agree with that. I can agree with that. And that's where I would go back to the whole point of, I think I'm okay with Titanforging as long as it has that cap. That would be the one quick change that I would make for Titanforging, to have that sort of, again, looking for raid to normal to heroic, blah, 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 blah. And then I would try and work on the original sort of, point of how the loot system is right now is absolutely terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I would be really happy, like my personal solution to Titanforging would be basically make Titanforging upgrade levels of gear, right? The same as we had in Mists of Pandaria, and also, I think it was in WoD too, we had that as well, where you would just be able to get Valor points, for example, from each boss, or Justice badges, or whatever, like iron scraps, and be able to apply those to pieces of gear, and that would allow you to offset the RNG that you might not get with like Titanforging items. And that would allow players who didn't really get lucky with a lot of items to still have their own chances to make their own progression path. I think Blizzard...
What would be the issue? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. What would be the issue with them adding both? So if they had this Titanforge with a cap...
I don't see any. There would be no
that's
problem.
the thing, though. Like, they could change the Titanforge system where it has this, there's still that element of, hey, I've killed Mythic Gahoon 5 times. Can I be fucked going in there and killing it again?
Yeah.
If they hit this system in, but then they also give you a way that you can scrap gear and you can upgrade stuff via that, right? then you have an element there where it could still maybe work, because there's no reason for them not to add both in.
Well, that's the thing, is I'm okay with people randomly getting a couple of cool items. The only issue is that I want to be able to work for those cool items too. And again, like, I'm okay. A lot of people have made like Titanforging synonymous with mount stuff and stuff like that. Like, oh, if you like mounts are random, what's the problem with gear being random? Like, people don't choose to play with you based on how many mounts you have unless you're in one of my mount off competitions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the big difference that WoW has between like a lot of these other features and these other games that like these systems are built off of, is that WoW is completely built around voluntary participation, and you have to be accepted into different groups and everything. And I think that... Go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
I think that Blizzard has kind of realized that, and they've looked at how many different ways that they've created these unfair environments. Because I do think that it is unfair that one player, like both players, can just show up to the same raid, and one player randomly receives a piece of gear that's substantially better than like the other person's, right? Through no fault of their own. And that's like kind of the personal loot issue. And I think that entire philosophy behind basically moving away from like a meritocracy of rewards and moving towards a gambling or casino method hasn't really been healthy for the game at all. And I think that's also it's just caused more and more of it too.
I'll use a different element in the game that I have a big problem with as an example, right, where I'm agreeing with you. So at the end of Legion, right, I'm going to use Rep Paladin as an example. It's taken a while for Rep Paladins to feel like they have a place in a raid and play decently to where the point you would take them, right? And obviously I raid with Quinn, so it's hard for us to justify having Quinn there because they're fucking wheelchairs, right? Yeah. But we like, they were doing well. You know, Quinn's obviously very good at Rep Paladin. And it was hard because people ask this question, moving forward into Legion or moving forward into BFA, there was that meme of like, you know, it's just going to be Legion 2.0. And people asked me back then, should they make it so a lot of classes play exactly the same as what they do moving forward into BFA? Because it's going to feel like there's some classes that literally have less skills, have exactly the same rotation, do the exactly same things, and play exactly like they did, right? Except now they have a global cooldown, which is another issue. So I think it was a hard place for Blizzard to be in, where they've finally got some classes playing well, and then moving forward into BFA, do they leave them like that, or do they give them all these new skills, new talents, and make it so they're really, really good? And so they decided to leave a lot of the classes. And I think it was a bad choice, right? So I think they've tried a lot of features, because if you asked me back then, should we leave the skills exactly the same? I would have said yes. But now moving forward, it was obviously a bad choice. I think it was a bad decision. And I think that they've tried a lot of things in BFA, and a lot of them just don't work.
I feel like whenever I leveled up in BFA, I went down to level 100 instead of up to 120. I lost a lot of the utility that my character had. I lost the fluidity of gameplay with the GCD, and I just lost a lot of other things too. And it didn't really feel like it was fun to play. And that's like the reason, one of the big reasons why I don't do Mythic Plus a lot now, is that I simply, and to be plainly honest, I do not enjoy and have fun playing my character, period, right? At like 110. And it's
world
really
scaling should get the fuck out of here. That's the worst decision they've ever made. I'm 386. Oh, absolutely. I'm like 386 on my rogue, and I can't 1v4 mobs without using evasion. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that's terrible. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely, absolutely terrible. It's trash.
Well, that's like, again, I just feel like all of these things, like, all tie into like a core, what I believe to be a toxic philosophy that Blizzard has of creating a uniform experience and forcing everyone into that uniform experience. And I think personal loot is an example of that, where players are now like pretty much compelled to, and like also like with personal loot, I feel like it hasn't even accomplished its goals. Like, it's actually been really detrimental to a lot of raiding guilds and created more animosity than what used to be present with Master Loot. And there's so many other examples of that too. But I think one of the big ones is just seeing the way that they've tried to create this experience for players where they want you to take 4.2 seconds to kill a mob, and if you take 4 seconds, then they're going to buff the mob. And if you take 4.5, they're going to nerf it. I think that the systems have just been so tightly tuned that it's taken the fun out of the game. Like,
yeah, I agree. I think the point of like the discussion that we're having now, I'm not even going to call it an argument, because I think we agree on the exactly same issue, except my issue was the RNG before Titanforging even comes into the RNG. So I have a problem with the RNG before it, and you have a problem with the RNG after it, which is Titanforging, right? So it's like we agree, I think, on exactly the same thing. Also, your camera looks smooth as fuck.
Thank
by
you,
the way,
dude. I appreciate it. I sure as hell hope so. It was expensive, man. I totally. Well, don't you feel like isn't that like the same that it's always been though? Like I mean, gear is always there's like a binary, 1-0 chance it drops or it doesn't drop. I mean, how's that ever been different?
because now we can't filter loot to players, right? Like, so traditionally, I think it's, pretty standard. You
Okay.
gear healers last, right? And then
Yeah.
you gear up tanks sort of relatively slowly, but then you're always going to gear your DPS fast because that's the easiest way for a raid to progress, right? One of my biggest things of this whole expansion, I think that the fact that you can't do Mythic Pluses and get over 340 Azerite system is trash. It is absolutely trash, and that needs to change. I know that we could argue, or we could probably agree for the next hour about problems with the Azerite system. But the fact that, like, for right now, I hate the fact that I don't want to go in there and do Mythic 10s. I don't want to farm Mythic 10s. I don't want to do them because it's stupid. Like, why would I when I can't get over 340 Azerite pieces? Like, really, I think that's a change that needs to happen ASAP rather than waiting for a patch. I think that there's a few things that they should just change.
I kind of agree with you there. I do. And if you want my personal opinion, I think this is like, because I'm very critical, right? Everybody knows that. I'm very, very critical. And I've said before that I actually think that with the changes that they're making in 8.1 to Azerite gear, I'm completely happy with Azerite gear, right? Like, I don't see a higher... I don't see it getting better from that point. And I also...
So my question to that would be, do you think it took too...
Did it take too long?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it should have been out on release. Like, that's the issue. And I think this is an intentional thing that Blizzard does nowadays, is that they consciously and intentionally delay quality of life increases, like having heirlooms, like holding off on adding heirlooms for, like, the beginning expansion. And they delay these quality of life increases in order to extend gameplay between the high-end players and the low-end players by giving the high-end players something that they can do right away that takes a lot longer, and then whenever enough of them burn themselves out on it, then they add that same feature in and they make it easier to do for the low-end players. And I think it creates a sense of futility. And also, it's, again, creating the uniform experience, like what I was saying before. I think the best example of that you can look at is the way that the Azerite necklace works and the way that Azerite power works. You can't get too far ahead on Azerite power, and you can't get too far behind unless you're just not playing. So they're kind of putting everybody on different carts of like a Ferris wheel or whatever you want to call it, a roller coaster, and they're saying, here you go. And nobody can get too far ahead or too far behind, and I feel like that just kind of, it makes getting farther ahead or farming anything or doing anything just a pointless procedure. It just doesn't matter.
It's bad when you miss farming more of souls 100 times a day. Like, that's it's in it.
I will say, yes, I actually preferred farming Maw of Souls than, because at least my class was more fun to play. There was a clear goal in mind, and I think that's, again, like,
and that's the key point. Like, that's the hammer on the head that I'll definitely agree with you with. Is I think it sucks right now where it's like, traditionally through WoW, if you're willing to put more time in, you're going to have this element of advantage over other players, right? Like, right. I hate the stat template for PvP. I think in Arena it should exist, of course, right? There should be a stat template for characters where you're only, say, 10% less, 10% weaker than another player inside the arena if you're really geared or not really geared. In terms of, like, battlegrounds and stuff like that, I want to go in there with my 385 character and be able to 1v2, 1v3.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want to be able to go in there and feel like my character that I've spent all this time on can go in there and make, like, this is, you're not going to see any PvP videos anymore that are worth a damn because people can't go in there and 1v3. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I
feel like that is a big mistake by Blizzard now, where right now we don't really, like you said, it's like a Ferris wheel. You can't really go anywhere with your character, right? You can't really do anything with your character. I think, again, tier sets is a really, really bad choice. I think that they need to bring tier sets back because it doesn't feel like you have anything that you can work towards on your character. I think it's quite an easy change. Personally, I've talked about a lot on stream where I'd like to see them bring in tier sets, but they only drop in the raids. And so let's say there's a chest, shoulders, and a helmet. It could be a 3-tier set, but it gives you something to work towards. It gives your character something unique, and say you could unlock it on tier 2, right? So the second circle, you could unlock something there, right?
And you don't feel like the re-origination array or anything like that fills that void at all, right?
No, not at all. I think, look, the Azerite system was a great idea, but I think they really, really, really could have done it a lot better. Right now, does that mean that it's going to take time to get good? But how much time is it going to take? Is it going to take to the end of the expansion where we're all done and moving on to the next expansion?
Well, it's like you can look at the Legion legendaries and how long it took for them to get them in a place that they should have been in at the beginning of launch. Like, if they had launched Legion with the Awakening Essence system, I feel like at least half of the negativity that surrounded Legion wouldn't have even happened. Like, I know you, more than anybody, was affected by that, because if I remember right, you were playing a Demon Hunter back then, and you didn't have the ring. Somebody else had the ring, and they were getting in groups. They were getting brought into the raid because of a purely RNG feature that you had no control over, that made you a loser and made him a winner.
Yeah, we had 3 Demon Hunters in our roster, and that's what we're going to take in. Both of those guys got the legendary ring, which is a half giant, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And I didn't get it, so I got sat for raid. Even with streamer buff, we just couldn't do it because you couldn't pull the numbers, right? And you look at, I still plain as day remember the first interview about legendaries for Legion. We're going back a little while now.
Yeah.
And they were saying how having X legendary compared to C legendary was going to be not much of a buff, right? It was going to be a very small difference between the characters. And if they did that, right, and that's what came out, it would have been great. It would have worked, right? Like it literally would have been a great feature, and it would have been able to work, right? So, but unfortunately, that's not the way they did it. They came out so there was clear legendaries that were so much better than anything else, right?
Well, the difference in the gulf between like the best in slot legendaries versus the worst in slot legendaries, like Prydes, by the way, like guys you might not remember, but Prydes was trash on release. Like it was absolutely terrible. They had to buff it like twice. So it was the same thing with Sifus as well. And even then, they still weren't best in slot unless you were doing like Mythic Plus or something that you needed the Absorb Shield for. There were a lot of examples of that happening, and I think that again, it's just a. I think the fundamental problem is that there's a disconnect that the developers have with the mentality of the player base, and I think that they have a hard time identifying with what the player base wants and how they feel. And I think that Blizzard makes decisions based off of statistical metrics, and they don't necessarily base their decisions as much off of like actual player feedback and player enjoyment. I think too often they correlate participation with enjoyment.
I think a hard thing as well right now, I've said this before, and people like, again, it comes down to an emotional decision, or as in what I would like to say. I think a lot of the time as well, we do need to sort of take some responsibility as a community. I really, really do. Like Van Ruki did a video about it a long time ago about leveling, how there was years back in Mr. Pandaria where people like leveling's too hard. So people wanted character boosts. People wanted this sort of stuff to happen. And then they gave it to us, and then people were up in arms about the fact that we got leveling boosts. But if you streamed prior to that, it was literally every day, I wish we had some way to level. I wish they gave us some way to boost the character. So it's like, I think it's hard because sometimes we do need to take a little bit of responsibility. Now, again, this has got nothing to do with Titanforging or anything. Yeah. But I think we need to understand that Blizzard are always going to make decisions based off what, quote unquote, the masses want, right? Because realistically, I don't have it open, but let's say there's 50,000 people watching Twitch right now, right? If 50,000 people quit, realistically, Blizzard don't care, right? So we're sort of the vocal people because that's what we see every day. We see people in our chat saying this is what they want, this is what's going on. You know, realistically, if 50,000 people quit WoW, no one's going to give a shit. Blizzard, Activision don't give a shit, right? So I think at the end of the day, a lot of these decisions is Blizzard trying to make sure that they're hitting this market, which they think is what they're going for, right? They think these are the people that they're trying to make happy. Where at the end of the day, I think they're sort of hit and miss a lot, and especially with BFA, I think they really hit and miss.
Well, I think that one, by the way, guys, please join up for this all deer raid. Join up for this so you guys can feed me gear, okay? Just real quick. So what I'm saying is like, I think that makes sense, but I think too often people discredit that by assuming that the wants and the expectations and, you know, the feelings of people on Twitch or on YouTube or whatever are opposed to the people who aren't necessarily speaking up. So, like,
but again, if you're going to use it that way, though, you need to filter out the people that are just in the background going bah! And just like putting rees in forums and putting like rees on Reddit and stuff like that. I'm talking about the people that are actually going to take the time to make a valid opinion or like a valid actual thing, right? Because if you look at say it was 50,000 right now, if we get rid of the people that are actually going to take the time to make a valid opinion or like a valid response to something, you know, those numbers are going to be way less. You know, it's going to be a much
absolutely.
less number.
There's a lot of people that, I think everybody has responded or done something like that that's just like very like emotional, right? They just like they say something because they just want attention, or you know, they're just mad about it, and that's just what they do. Like, I don't think anybody is immune to that, including myself. I do it all the time, and I have to work on that myself personally. But I also don't think that necessarily like the way that I view the game and what I want for the game, because from my perspective, I feel like I want to make sure that that casual player has something that they enjoy and they have fun with. And the problem to me is that the way the developers have tried to address the casual experience problem is by offering them a watered down easy mode version of the hardcore experience. And I think that casual players, and one of the things that was really special about WoW in general, is that it gave people the chance to like forge their own destiny and make decisions and take chances, and it gave them the opportunity to succeed, and it also gave them the privilege to fail. You were the master of your own destiny, whereas now I feel like things are just so set in stone as what you're going to do. And this is like what we were talking about, what you were saying about kind of what I was saying, and you gave another example for with like the stat templates, is a uniform experience.
So I have a question. This is something that I've discussed for a few years now on Twitch. Is again going back to if someone gave me $100 million to invest into a game, I'm saying I wouldn't put it into an MMORPG game, right? Like for me personally, even if you look at classic WoW, Vanilla's never been like a hardcore grindy game for me, right? I came from like MU Online, Lineage 1, the Korean servers, like International Ragnarok Online, Dark Age Camelot, all these types of things, right? So Vanilla was like laughable for me and my friends when you looked at like, oh, look how grindy Vanilla is. But I think the thing with Vanilla, it was a good mix of being hardcore enough for a lot of people, but then at the same time, it wasn't some insane grind, right? Where you looked at Lineage 1 or Lineage 2 in the early days, and it took, you know,
people
half
viewed
a year
WoW
to
as
level,
a casual
right?
MMO back then.
And that's the thing, right? I think that Blizzard is trying to keep up with what the casual element is. It's hard to try and argue these things, right? Because if I say that I disagree with a decision, or if I say that I agree with a decision that Blizzard has made these days, people just straight away call you a shrill. Even if I try and make people see the reason of why, I'm not saying that I agree with it, but I might say like, hey, this is maybe why they're going to make that decision. And people are just like shrill, whatever they want to say. Well, that, right?
You're completely right. Like I've gotten the same thing whenever like I've been positive at all towards like the Azerite system in 8.1, because I feel like obviously if the amount of ways that you can get Azerite is limited, they have effectively created a Valor cap for Azerite gear, because you can exhaust every single way to get Azerite per week, and then there's nothing else for you to do. So they've effectively created the thing that people wanted. It's just, I think the issue is people don't like Azerite gear on a fundamental level.
I mean, like, we got Warfronts, dude. That's the key point of the expansion. Aren't you having fun?
Well, the thing is, that's the issue, right? Is I feel like Blizzard has done these things so many times where Warfronts actually, I feel like, I could have a lot of fun with Warfronts. How fucking cool would it be is that if every single time you unlock the Warfront, there is a mythic version of the Warfront for 20 people only, and you and your raiding guild would go in there and kill a boss that was about the same difficulty of Zekvoz or, you know, like maybe Vectis on Mythic Uldir. That would be amazing.
Aren't they adding that in?
Well,
aren't they legitimately doing?
They are, but I don't think it's going to be that difficult. That's the only problem. It's like they are doing that, but I don't know like to what extent. And this is something that people have obviously wanted, at least like I have. And I think the issue with Warfronts is that it's like, again, it's like very, very easy content that's like easily consumable, that takes no real effort to get into, and it's again a uniform experience. That's why they didn't make it to where you can pre-mate it, is because the experience is basically created to be consumed in like a 20 to 30 minute period. I'm not a big fan of like how tightly they're trying to control everything.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that one.
Yeah.
All right, Swifty's just started streaming, so he's probably going to be yelling in the background, so I should probably leave.
Okay,
but
man. Well, thanks a lot for
I
coming on.
always love chatting to you, buddy.
Yeah,
It's always good.
I do
One
too.
thing I'll say before I bounce as well.
Yeah.
And this is something that I've tried for years in my chat. And I think it sort of brings in a big element of what. Sorry if you can hear him in the background. I think some of the problem is that you can hear with not just Twitch in general. Some of the problem with like the WoW community at the moment as well, which is the part where I think we have to take a little bit of responsibility. Let's say I average 1,000 viewers. In the last 6 years, I've never once been able to have an issue that I'll bring up in the chat where let's try and come up with something that we can all agree should change in the game, right? And this is only with 1,000 people. Let's try and come up with something that should change in the game with a valid reason of how to fix it that everyone can agree on. Yeah. And not once in 6 years have I ever found something that we can all agree on.
Well,
and I mean, people need
to
give like a valid answer, right?
People argue in bad faith. I mean, if I say like, hey, I really would want, cancer to go away, there's going to be somebody that's like, well, at least it gives doctors a job or something like that, right?
Yeah,
and like they don't actually think that. They're just saying it for a reaction and to be contradictory.
That's why I say like a valid answer.
Yeah.
Right? It's very, very, very hard. So I think, again, there are so many fucking things that I think Blizzard have fucked up on with BFA. And I really wish that they did a lot of things differently, but I can see why they're trying a lot of things. I think they hit and missed on most of them. And I think the BFA, I said it like a month into the beta for BFA, I said, this is the first expansion since I personally have started streaming that I'm scared of the longevity of. And moving forward, I still feel the same way. I'm very scared of sort of the longevity of BFA being able to stream it for the next 8 months.
What do you think is going to happen?
We better start learning how to fucking build in Fortnite or something.
Oh no!
Look at it.
Jeez, you're not very confident in BFA, really, like long term.
To be honest, if it's like another 8 months, I don't think so. I think that there's a lot of things that have really turned people off. Like, look, there's other games, and realistically, like, look, my chat 101, and I'm sure it happens to you on a much bigger scale, but like, I could have 15 people, 100 watching, and they're like, if there's any of my subs in the chat, they know exactly what I'm talking about. They'll be like, Ching, we watch you for you. We just want to watch you play whatever you want. And then I'll fucking, I don't know, play Path of Exile and
you don't
700 people leave.
Never give them what they want. Give them what they need. They don't know what they want. By the way, speaking of they don't know what they want, time out these fucking clowns putting this standby thing in chat. It's annoying as hell.
What? That's S-Fan's emote,
It's
dude.
annoying
He just
as
made
fuck,
that.
man.
S-Fan just made it. S-Fan
I didn't
just
say
made...
S-Bomb was annoying. I said the emote. Spamming it's annoying. I hate people
But
that
they're trying
spam
to
in
show
my stream.
support for S-Fan.
No, they're not. They're just being annoying.
They're just
Just
standing
time 'em
by,
out.
dude.
Do what?
All right, I'm gonna go. I'm
Okay.
gonna go play Lost Ark because I
Alright.
just finished downloading it, and John's yelling in the background.
All
but
right, man. Have
good
fun.
chat,
I'll
man.
probably
Good chat.
tune in
Always
later on.
down.
Yeah,
Get
for
me
sure,
back
man.
on our Classic Cast. We'll discuss. I like going on there and disagreeing with you because everyone disagrees.
I enjoy that too, actually. I enjoy
all craft. What did I say? Classic craft. All
you
craft.
say
There's too many fucking crafts. I don't
Just
know.
Get on
okay.
the
I'm gonna make.
podcast,
I'm gonna
everybody.
make Ozcraft.
It's a good
Ozcraft
idea, yeah.
coming soon when I get back to Australia.
There you
and I'm
go,
just
man.
gonna laugh at Heroes of the Sword. All right, boys. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. See you later. Peace.
Yep. You have a real fucking problem, man.
What do you mean?
People like the fucking emote. It was funny.
No, it wasn't funny. It was just annoying.
Yeah,
What's
it
funny
was
about
fucking
typing
funny.
the
It's not
same
like you
thing
were
in
fucking
chat?
reading chat anyway. You're fucking.
Well, people want to have a
debating with
conversation about the debate, right? And you can't have that whenever people are just spamming the same thing over and over mindlessly. Like, it doesn't add anything to the chat. It's just a negative, annoying thing that people can do. Like,
You were doing that for chat. You were just talking to Chinglish. Let them have their fun for like 5 minutes.
How's
man.
that fun? Typing the same thing in chat.
They
What's
like
fun
it.
about that?
What the
Yo,
fuck's
can I
the
get the
problem,
mason? Can I get the mason in the offhand? Okay, yeah. So I feel like a lot of the points, like Chinglish, like I think Chinglish and I think we agree on a lot of this stuff, 100%. But oh, can I get the offhand too? It's fun because you find it annoying. Well, that's why. I mean, that's the thing is just time it out. Like, I don't like annoying people. Like, I've made it very, very clear that if people are annoying, I will time them out because I don't like that behavior. Like, I do not like that behavior. It puts me in a bad mood. I don't like dealing with it, period. I don't like people that act that way. I don't like people that think that way. I don't like anything about it. So, yeah.
It was a mild fucking spam. You just like.
It wasn't, like, I'm not mad about like the thing itself. Like it's not a big deal. Like I'm not mad. I'm just saying like I don't like it, and that's why I said to time people out. Like I do not like spam. I think it's fucking stupid. Like I'm not trying to be a dick or anything, but I don't like it. Like I mean, I want to be able to interact with my chat. It's really hard to do that. And then whenever people are spamming the same dumbass shit, it makes it hard for me to do it at all.
It's what you do when someone raids your channel or hosts you, man. Like,
did Esfon host me?
Yeah, are you? You're actually unironically being a fucking dickhole right now.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you're actually being a fucking asshole.
How was I supposed to know that?
Pay attention to what's going on, dumbass.
I'm trying to pay attention to the fucking conversation that I'm trying to have.
That's what people do.
Like you want me to go read fucking donations while I'm having a conversation with Chinglish? Like that's kind of rude.
Don't get mad if a bunch of people spam an emote when you're getting raided or host.
Like, they were doing it for like 10 minutes. Like
you're being such a baby.
No, I'm not. Man. I don't like spam. You
really are being a fucking baby.
I don't like spam. Period. Like I don't fucking like it. I don't like it in my stream at all. Like that's all there is to it. I don't fucking like it. And if people do it, I time them out. Like how would you like it? And people, if I was like, oh, why would I? Like what if I said the exact same shit to you with people calling you McCuck?
You have
like, how's that
encouraged
different?
it before. You've encouraged them calling me McCuck before.
Not really.
Yeah, you did.
I really kind of haven't. Like I don't think that I have, at least. And if I have, I apologize because you don't like it. I feel like I have the right to prefer certain things. Because it's nothing like wrong. I'm not mad.
All I'm saying is that it's very typical. It's etiquette. It's like Twitch etiquette to spam a person's emotes if they're raiding or hosting. It's like baseline shit.
I mean, sure. Like I don't see how it wouldn't be like. It was going on for like 5 minutes, man. Like it's like if you do it at the beginning, that's fine. But like I've been hosted by people tons of times before. Like that doesn't mean endlessly spam emotes. Like, and just because that's what they do, it doesn't mean I have to be okay with it. Like I don't get it, man. But yeah, I don't like it. Like it's just that simple. I just don't like it. Like I mean, if people don't like it, I don't like it, then fine. But I don't like that at all.
Holy shit, you're a fucking idiot, dude. What's your name?
What?
Whip Nene 2? Really? I know it's not my stream. He said, McCall, this is not your stream. I know it's not my stream. I'm just saying, if you get a host or whatever, it's etiquette to spam the person's email. That's all I was saying. Fucking moron.
Look, dude.
Anyway,
I don't like it, man. Like, period.
Okay, whatever.
Like, that's it. If I had known Esfond had hosted me, then yeah, I would have been more okay with it. I didn't know that because I was trying to have a conversation with Chinglish. Like, I'm not being a dick. I mean, I was trying to give the conversation to Chinglish and, you know, engage him because he came on the stream and offered to talk about something.
Okay. Anyway.
What?
So about the debate.
Okay.
How do you feel? Did it change your mind at all?
Not really.
Titanforging or Warforging? You feel the exact same way?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think that we all kind of we kind of agreed. Like, he said he'd be okay with it if it had a cap, and he said it'd be okay. I mean, it seemed like he said it'd be okay if you could work towards it too. I mean, it seemed to me like we kind of agreed on it, right?
Yeah, but you just want it gone, period, don't you?
Well, yeah, I do want it gone, period, but like that would be an ideal thing, but I would settle to be okay if they were just like, okay, well, it's not gone completely, but at least now you have another way to like work towards it that isn't RNG. I would be okay with that because I don't think that they're going to get rid of it entirely. Like in a perfect world, yeah, but I would be okay if they just did it normally. Or they just had a non-RNG alternative to it. Like, that's all it is. Everything agree that you said, especially with the fact that Blizzard is trying to control everything and everyone. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I think is basically happening, is they focus very hard on trying to like make sure everybody has the same experience, and I think that's kind of made the experience itself boring. It's a video game, don't forget. Well, what does that matter? Like, if it wasn't a video game, like, you think I shouldn't criticize it because it's a game? I mean, like, I don't know. It's kind of weird.